did Yaakov cry? He would not be buried with him. She would not be buried with him in Ma'arat HaMachpelah. Right? It is a grief. It's not just sadness. It is a very powerful grief of a non-culmination, of not reaching the point that you thought that you would reach. Where's the other time that a person lifting up the voice and crying? Esav, good Dove. Let's take a look at page 138. Actually, yeah, page 140. 141, verse 38. And Esav said to his father, have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too, father. And Esav raised his voice and wept. Verse 38, page 141. Verse 38. Esav said to his father, have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too, father. And Esav raised his voice and wept. In Hebrew, Vayisa Esav kolo vayefk. He lifted his voice and cried. Wow. So all of a sudden we see that these two explanations of the sages, that he wouldn't be buried together, and that he was destitute, he came destitute to marry, these two are very, very well linked all of a sudden. Esav's anguish led to his commanding Eliphaz. Why was Yaakov, and that's why he was destitute, why was Yaakov not buried next to Rachel? He was buried next to Leah. Why did Yaakov marry Leah?
Not because
he was deceived. What led to the deception? He had to work for 7 years. Right? Because he came destitute. Had he not come destitute, had he come like Eliezer, his father's servant, came to find a wife for Yitzchak, his father, so he would have been treated royally. He wouldn't have been sent to be a shepherd. Right? Lavan says, what? You're my flesh and blood. She worked for me for free. Right? Right? It was this whole desperate situation which led to this grief, this wail over here. And very, very interesting. Right? On Shabbos I discussed how Yaakov was a man of truth, and he needed to do what he had to do. Even though it went against his value of truth, he needed to get that blessing. But nevertheless, right? Even if you have to do something for a certain end, right?
It means that doesn't justify the end.
Right. He needed to, even if we understand he needed to do what he did, but there's still going to be some fallout. What was the fallout?
He deceived.
We have, right, the deception, which led then to deception after deception. The deception led to him being impoverished when he got there, which led to Lavan deceiving him. Right? It one after the other. There's the Medrash that he said to Leah in the morning, last night I called you Rachel and you answer. Now I call you Leah and you answer? And she said back, I learned from the best. Mm-hmm. Your father called Esav and you answered. Your father called Yaakov and you answered.
How did they know so fast? How did they know so fast?
Right? So whether the Medrash is telling us, right, an actual conversation, or the Medrash is leading us to link the two events, right? You know, sometimes you have to do something, right? But if someone is hurt along the way, right, you have to be careful. You have to do what you can do to try to, alleviate, to try to heal that as much as you can. I'll show you one other very interesting, right? By Esav, going back over there, when Esav realized that he got, the bracha was taken from him, right? The Torah describes it very, very vividly. If you look back on page 138, verse 34, verse 139, right? Kishmoa Esav, when Esav heard the words of his father Yitzchak, Vayitzak, Tza'aka, Gedola, Umara, Ad Ma'od. He let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry. Right? A very unusual, the Torah normally doesn't go into the feelings that people are having. Right? That's more of the medrash that we find. But over here it goes into vivid details. Right? And, right, look what happens. Go to page 1255 for a moment.
What page?
1255. Who was a descendant of Esav? Amalek. Amalek was Esav's grandson. Who was the scion of Amalek? Megillat Esther. Who was the scion of Amalek?
Haman.
None other than Haman, who issues his decree against the Jews. Page 1255, towards the bottom, chapter 4 over there. Mordechai learned all that had been done. And Mordechai tore his clothes, put on a sackcloth with ashes. And he went out to the midst of the city and cried loudly and bitterly. In Hebrew, Vayizak Za'aka Gedola Umara. By Esav, Vayitzak Za'aka Gedola Umara. The same exact words. Esav cried when Yaakov had deceived him. Generations later, Yaakov's descendant Mordechai cries when Esav's descendant Haman issues the decree against him. Sometimes we have to do something, but if people are hurt along the way, we have to do our very best to try to alleviate that hurt. That hurt of Esav led to Yaakov letting out a bitter cry. A cry, Vayisad kolo vayef, lifting up his voice and crying that this ultimate reunion of him and Rachel would not be because of this pain to Esav and the command to Eliphaz and him becoming impoverished and coming to Lavan impoverished and having to work and being fooled, etc., etc., etc. So we have to, as we said with the ladder, we need to bring the spirituality, right, down into this world. And when we cause pain, sometimes we might cause pain along the way. In order to keep that spirituality here, we need to do our best to apologize, to correct, to rectify whatever we can to minimize. And we need to bring the good down. And when times we do otherwise, we need to do our best to make that flashpoint. Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, mitzvah, heaven and earth, as we meet on the ladder. Yes, Dov?
Hashem is the former, we are the latter.
Okay, Dov. Very good, thanks.
Too bad we
And these were the Latter-day Saints, right, Dov? Okay.
Totally different.
No, the angels go up and down on there on a ladder, and a ladder is something you can climb it, so it's about climate change.
Climate change. Okay, Dov, let's turn off the tape before we lose anyone who might ever listen to this.